Welcome to the Left Wing Back podcast. It's me once again, Brian O'Donoghue here, filling in for Kev, who's a little bit under the weather, and delighted to be joined once again by the fabulously handsome and brilliant footballer, Mr. Paul Byrne, aka Fisher. Hello, sir.
How's it going, Brian? How are things?
Good.
We had a nice exciting weekend on the football front, so looking forward.
And as a little private in-joke, Paul, some things are better done twice anyway, you know. Let's not speak of it. We're going to do something maybe a little bit different. Maybe Kev has done it before, but that is we're going to start with the junior football, junior B football. Aska top of their group, and Rathvilly top of the other group in the junior B. But Aska the team to beat there, and that's probably to be fully expected, Paul.
Yeah, and I think it is. Obviously, we may have spoke before last week about Aska being a first team in it, and that does count for a lot because you've every guy having to put in the effort to make the first team, as opposed to maybe being happy enough to play on the second team and then some guys coming up. But you'd have to say Aska a certain form team, and the expectation would be that they'd win it. And I suppose at this point, it's not that long ago, and Aska were an intermediate team, and I think we a lot of us would have had experience of playing against them at that level, and I'd expect that that's what's going to happen. I'd expect that they'll win that one. Yeah,
absolutely. Have to give a shout out for your lads as well. The Clonmore second team finishing second in that group behind Aska. Any secrets to the trade you can share with us there on that team?
No, not really, but I think obviously Clonmore had a second team last year. Were junior C, looking up to win it and everything that goes with that. But I suppose if you're using your junior team to blood guys, and certainly the younger lads, it is better to be maintaining your junior B position and playing that slightly higher standard. In order to give those guys a bit of exposure to adult football. So from that point of view, obviously Clonmore have qualified for the quarterfinals, so they're guaranteed to remain in junior B at a minimum. So to be happy enough with that, I think.
Yeah, to give people the rundown then of the junior B championship. So Aska top their group, Clonmore in second, Ballinabrana finished third, and Fenna on the bottom of that particular group one. In group two, Rathvilly on top with a Rogue second, Kildavin Clonegall third, and Bagnallstown Gales on the bottom of that particular group. But it's been an interesting Junior B Championship, and a long way to go yet. There's a lot of football to be kicked there, so we'll be watching it with keen attention. To talk about the Junior A then, we've had some really tight games in that championship. I suppose Kev has probably been the Junior A expert so far this year, and I have to apologise to the teams that haven't got to a Junior A game yet. But I suppose, would it be fair to say that between Fighting Cocks and Loughlin-Bridge, they're the two form teams, maybe either one of those are the teams to beat?
Yeah, I would think so. Obviously, Loughlin-Bridge, had maybe a rocky enough start by their standards, put things right, had a good win against the Blues last weekend. You'd expect, given how well they performed last year as well, that they'd be in the shake-up there. Obviously, the Cocks have, managed to put in a few good performances. I think they've 3 wins out of 3 at this stage, and straight to a semi-final. You would suspect this between the two of them. Again, though, you have a Blues team that is still featuring there, and if tradition counts for anything, they'll certainly be competitive, if not a bit more than that. So, and then obviously after that, then you have St. Mullins perhaps as well, who probably have got to the measure of the big ball at this stage. Had a had a good win against Ballon at the weekend. And it'll be a tricky enough team to face also. So I think it's probably wide open, and Ballon are obviously still there too. But yeah, I think it's wide open. It's a very difficult grade to get out of, and I think I probably mentioned it before. No matter what grade you find yourself kind of falling down into, there's no guarantee about jumping back up, and it's tricky enough to get out of those grades. And I think a lot of the teams there certainly will be wanting as soon as possible to take themselves up to the higher level. But it's very competitive, very, very competitive championship.
I think it's testament as well to, in fairness to Carlow GAA, with the restructuring that was done a number of years ago, it's now the case, I suppose, that there's more. The championships are more competitive, and there was a time where the Junior A Championship was almost uniquely contested by club second teams, whereas it's really good to see that. And one of the things I always wondered years ago was you'd look at the All-Ireland final, Kerry would be playing Mayo or whoever it would be, and you'd look at the programme and you'd see that Mike Frank Russell plays junior club football in Kerry. Now, I know they have different structures altogether, but when I was younger, I remember thinking at the time that, God, you'd other than maybe Johnny Kavanagh, you'd rarely see a player in Carlow who was played junior club, because usually the junior, when it got to junior, it was a club second team, and it's a much better system now, where you can have really strong county players who, they play at junior A level in their county, but it makes the junior A grade then a better spectacle to watch, and a far more competitive championship. Would that be fair?
Yeah, no, I think so. And sure, look at David Clifford as a junior player up to this year. I remember being talking to some guys, and they were kind of saying, "God, isn't it amazing? How good he is, and he's a junior footballer." And I remember my comment back was, "Intermediate football is to sort that lad out." But but in fairness, if you go back over the years and you look at other counties, Meath was always a great hotbed of junior A footballers playing. I think Ollie Murphy played with a junior club. I think when Meath were pretty good, and for guys like, as you say, like from Carlow, whatever, we'd be reading that, and we thought it was amazing that there was a junior footballer playing in for a senior county team. But now we look at obviously the restructuring in Carlow, and most of the junior A clubs would have somebody in on that panel, or certainly very close to it, and it's positive, very good.
You mentioned it already. Did the St Mullins Ballon result surprise you at all? The nature of it, maybe?
I suppose, yeah, but to a degree, like we've probably all at points over our lives played St Mullins. I know they've only resurrected football again in recent years. But look, it should, St Mullins guys, they're athletes, probably first and foremost hurlers, and that's fine. But outside of just getting, the used to playing with the big ball, like they've all the other attributes, which is, athletic, competitive, big, strong, all of those type of things. So, once they get a bit of time in with the size 5, I think they, they'll be as competitive as anybody.
Yeah. I wouldn't like to see any of the other teams trying to go the other way and suddenly pick up a hurl, and I said there'd be lessons learned fairly quick. The Junior A Football Championship, I said it here at the start, the Fighting Cocks and Loughlin Bridge looked like the foreign teams to beat, but we can't, I suppose, ignore the other side of the group, which is Palatine have finished on top with Ballon in second, and then St Mullins. If you're the way the draw works now, so Loughlin Bridge play St Mullins and Ballon play the Blues, you wouldn't fancy calling any of those games, would you?
No, I don't think you would. Who is the Fighting Cocks? Is it?
So, well, the Cocks are straight through to semi-final, and Loughlin Bridge play St Mullins, and the Blues play Ballon. Yeah,
the Blues play Ballon. Like, Ballon, I would imagine they would have certainly, fancied themselves to get through the knockout stages, which now they've done. So, job done there, and now it's probably time to kick on again. They're playing a very, very, very difficult team. I think, if you look at the teams that have gone straight through the semi-final, but if you look at Palatine just as an example, like obviously they have other issues at the moment, probably more pressing in their own mind, which is
Yeah,
to maintain senior status. But as a club, they'll want to uh, go as far as they can in any championship they can still progress in. So there'll be no pushover in that junior A whatsoever.
you can absolutely say that again. To move on then to intermediate, and I suppose to start with the game that maybe wouldn't have caught the attention as much as expected, the Grange Michael game, or the Grange Navon game. I think was everyone as surprised as me at the gap in the victory there for Grange?
Maybe the gap in the victory, but maybe not necessarily the result. I had seen Grange on a couple of occasions, and I just felt, I think we talked about it last week, like they're capable of getting goals and they're known for it. But I just thought they had enough guys on that pitch who had enough about them to maybe get over the Michael game. Maybe not by quite as much. But the result of itself didn't necessarily surprise me. But maybe the size of it.
The Grange are whores to score goals, and that's a phrase that gets said over and over again. I had in my match report about the middle diamond they had was really effective the other night. So Killian Murphy at centre back, Cathal Bailey and Fionn Murphy in midfield, and then Paddy Hickey at centre forward against Navon the other night. That diamond was really the win in the game. Obviously, add in John Murphy's scoring attributes and his frees and all the things that he brings to any team, and then young Shane Cormack kicking 1-2. But that middle diamond and those two scoring forwards, you wouldn't and you couldn't dismiss Grange at this stage of the championship. They're still there, and a bit of momentum now could see them mount a serious challenge.
Yeah, I think it can. I think, in fairness to them as well, obviously that diamond is quite strong, and we talked with Shane coming in with 1-2. I think also they have the players to, if you like, go to plan B as and when they might want to go to plan B if it's not working out in terms of moving through that diamond. There's a lot of options with, John Murphy and various others where maybe they can, start to go long or whatever. So I think they'll have a big part to play in it. They've Ballinabrana, I think, next in quarter final. That'll be a tricky one to call, and I know we're not in the business of calling because it's probably putting a hex on teams. But I think that'll be a close one. That'll be a close one. I sort of probably fancy Grange for it, even though we're not going to pin ourselves to anything. But again, I think we did talk about last week. Any team that's able to get goals and tag on a few points, they're very, very hard beaten. And I think Grange are the epitome of that now at this stage.
100%. I should mention as well, Alan Fleming and Ned Pendard had two outstanding games the other night in that Navon game. I have to talk about Navon. Your heart will go out to them. We know from the interview with Adam Kenny after the Clamore game that they're had a tragic beginning to the start of the season, to start of the championship, and that can't be easy for any team. Despite all that, you would have felt in a game where it was moving it off the pot, lads. Navon, Michael men, it's one team you'd be saying there's going to be a sting in the tail there. They will go down fighting, and unfortunately, that fight just wasn't there the other night. Second half, they only kicked 4 frees from Adam Kenny, who was doing his best. And it's it's no comment on the players. I'm sure they wanted to win the game, but whatever bit of organisation is lacking, it's a problem that they had the other night, and Grange were value for their win.
Yeah, I think to be fair, obviously the first game they had, and they were coming into it, anything that had gone wrong sort of previously went wrong, and they were probably not in good shape in the first game. Much improved, I think, against Clonmore, and I think last week I think he gave credit to not just the players but to Mick Byrne, because he had gathered them to such a point that they looked like they were going to have a say on the championship. And I would imagine there was elements of maybe how they played in the first game that probably creeped into the other night as well. Like you would have expected them to kick on to some degree, because they had got going and they got used to playing football, and maybe things were a bit of a better even keel for them. So I'd say they're hugely disappointed in as much as anything. But I also, if there's anything about them, like they'd be very honest about, maybe where they felt it went wrong. And I know certainly, it'd be no more honest than Adam Kenny, who gave a very honest interview, I think, after the Clonmore game. So they'll be hugely disappointed, I think. But having said that, in terms of the rest of the championship, who'd be possibly better value going into quarter final, you'd have to say Grange would be. And just looking at the games so far, that was, the Grange against Clonmore, Grange against Tullow, and Grange against Michael versus the 3 games that Michael had. I think the consistency was with Grange, that bit more than it was with Michael.
Yeah. And I suppose to move it over to the other side of the group, because of who Navan have to play now, is there a more eye-watering, mouth-watering local derby than the relegation playoff now between Kilbride and Navan, between the Currys, the Twin Nolans, who obviously hurled with Michael and kick ball with Kilbride. I know the 2 lads are not playing this year for injuries and that kind of thing. But that's a mouth-watering relegation playoff. And, Kilbride have put in 3 very spirited performances. Navan have put in, I suppose, 3 of whatever the opposite of that is. And do you end up in a situation here where you have a team on somewhat of, with a little bit of momentum going? I know Kilbride had 3 losses, but they were improving as the 3 games went on. Navan seems to be going the opposite direction. So they won't have the bigger pick. A panel there of, I had it in my hand a second ago. Where is it gone? They have a panel there of 33 players. Kilbride have, according to the program, 29. That makes a liar out of me. But the ultimate point still stands. It's a mouth-watering relegation playoff for those 2 neighbours.
Yeah, I think just in terms of the number of players that appear on programs, I think clubs have a tendency to list guys who, maybe are out with injury and all of that as well.
Of course.
So they probably, have no hope of featuring. So, maybe Kilbride's 29 is a little bit less than that, and maybe Michael's are a bit less than that as well. But having said that, Kilbride, to be fair, I know we've talked about them before. They'll always show up. They'll always have, whether it's 20 guys or 18 guys or 29, as might be alluded to at the moment. They'll certainly be. They'll certainly do their best. There's no question about that. And I think they haven't took any kind of a beating in any of the 3 games. The Aero game relatively tight. Maybe I was probably somewhat surprised how tight that particular game was. Was that down to Aero? Was that down to Kilbride? Hard to know because of the way results went subsequently. Because you'd be made a liar of exactly in the same way as you mentioned before. I just think maybe at this stage Kilbride probably feel. And I'd say, anybody has watched them, they've probably given the better performances and the more consistent performances. But you can't discount Michael for all their attributes. If they get it right on the day, they could beat you by 5 or 6 points. You know what I mean? Like we've all against them. So it's hard to know. But I think it's certainly mouth-watering. I suppose the local nature to it does add to it. And I think, nobody likes playing in a relegation final. There's no question about that. But they're treated as a final, and they're treated as similar to any other final. You may go and win it, or the repercussions are significant, and the fallout and listening to everyone else giving out about you is significant as well. So they'll all be anxious. They'll all be anxious to do well in that. But I think you'd kind of say maybe Kilbride might have enough there.
assuming there's some kind of a Curry Foley WhatsApp group, I'd say it'll be fairly quiet now over the next period of time while that fixture gets put together. Wanted to mention as well then, back in the Grange Navon group, your own side, Clonmore and St. Pat's yesterday. And I suppose the idea crossed my mind to invite you down here. For those who are only tuning in, myself and Paul live about 4 or 5 fields as the crow flies from each other. So I was going to say, sure, why don't you come down here and or I'll go up to you, we'll do it in your front room or something. But when I tell you what I'm about to say, I'm glad I didn't invite you down or go up there, because about 3 minutes before throwing yesterday in Netwatch Cullen Park, I said to Kevin that I felt Tullow were going to beat Clonmore by about 6 points. Now, I was completely, I talk about being like the opposite of what is correct. Clonmore obviously came out comfortable victors in the end, 6 or 7 points in it. To give some context to that, I seen Clonmore against Navon, and they just made such hard work of the victory. I couldn't see where they were going to make such a difference so quickly. And I'd seen Tullow against Grange, where in a very tight, tense local derby, they stuck to their processes and their systems, whatever they are, and they were really, really impressive for a lot of the game against Grange, even though Grange got a better start. So my logic seemed right, but I couldn't have been more wrong. It was a blistering start from Clonmore, and they were out of the traps brilliantly.
Yeah, I think there were. I think obviously going into the game, maybe St. Pat's, maybe for the neutral to some degree, would have probably felt that they had probably shown a bit more form thus far, particularly in the previous round. I had watched St. Pat's against Michael the first day, and in fairness, Michael by their own admission were very, very poor on that particular day. But yet, in the first half, they had opportunity to penetrate St. Pat's to some degree, but the gap just got wider and wider. And look at, St. Pat's kicked some lovely scores, but there's an element of you kind of saying, well, they were getting that far ahead.
Yeah.
You'd be
Yeah.
maybe trying things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily try in a tight game. So I'd say St. Pat's were certainly full of confidence, but I think the first half yesterday from Clonmore was as good as I had seen in considerable length of time. Probably, there were some very good games in the Leinster Club Championship last year that Clonmore played with that kind of element of swagger to some degree, but organised as well. So there was a kind of a decent balance to that. But I thought yesterday, certainly for the first half, the intensity, particularly in the tackle, the turnover, and the counter attack, was just fairly impressive. And I think they've certainly put themselves up in lights to some degree as a result. But I suppose the other side of it is, 5 points up at half time. We're getting away from St. Pat's as much as possible, but St. Pat's were still in with a shout there with 10, 15 minutes to go. I think they brought it back to probably a point or two. I think the effort of kind of bringing it back to a point or two kind of proved a little bit too much to them. But Clonmore seemed to be always in control to some degree. And I think it was definitely the best performance of the championship for Clonmore, no question.
There's no doubt about that. Some great workhorses in the likes of Tom Pollard and stand-up performers like Shane Murphy as well. Have to mention, the names escape me now, Connolly, Cormac Connolly and Oisin Doyle, who were in place of Croc Mulvaney, David Mulvaney and Con Murphy. Now, David Mulvaney and Con Murphy are two of the most experienced men Clonmore had. I think David maybe picked up a knock in the Navon game, and Con Murphy is the ideal, especially at intermediate level, he's the ideal I suppose versatile man in terms of you can start him and he brings all that experience into a game, and he'll get you a couple of scores, especially if things are tight. He can also bring him in with a few minutes to go when you need ball to stay up the far end of the field and have an experienced, calm head up there. So I was interested to see Clonmore, I suppose, putting into younger guys in a game to go top the group. But that little bit of injection of youth, it really paid off. And Oisin Doyle in particular seems to be brimming with confidence. His point in the first half, down towards the scoreboard end, was like one of the scores of the game. Where are you pulling these guys from?
Well, to be fair, Oisin was, sort of always there, but he was struggling a little bit with hamstring injuries and stuff, so didn't probably feature or get as many minutes as he would have liked. Played very little in the league. Was obviously probably a definite starter for the Carlow 20s. Couldn't play any game in the championship because of it. Has been sort of niggling at him, but he seems to have got it right now. So whatever Oisin would do on the field doesn't necessarily come as a surprise to us, because we've kind of seen it. Obviously, he's a left-footed kicker, he's a right-footed kicker. He's extremely fit. He's very fast. He has all those attributes. In fairness to Cormac, Cormac is he's not necessarily the youngest on it. I'd say the brother probably is, Owen, maybe more so, who put in a huge shift as well. His work rate is exceptional, but Cormac is extremely steady. Again, he picked up a very bad injury last year, so the recovery there was something in the region of 9 or 10 months or maybe more. So he's only coming right in the last while. So he's Cormac could be starting in a lot of people's minds anyway. So it wasn't that he was just sprung. He was there. But look, we all know at this stage, like, football is no longer a 15-man sport. Like, it's 20, 23, 24 lads. So.
Yeah. No, never was a true word spoken. I'm going to blame COVID and getting married for missing the uprising of Cormac Connolly and Oisin Doyle. They were brilliant yesterday. Clonmore didn't score for 20 minutes in the second half. Tullow, I suppose, had to have a proper patch at some stage. But I get the impression from you wouldn't be overly concerned with that 20-minute scoring gap.
No, not particularly. I suppose I think they were still creating chances in that 20 minutes. I think they had a couple of wides, and maybe a couple of things broke down in the St. Pat's, within the St. Pat's forward line. Within the St. Pat's back line, our own forward line. But look at that happens. It happens to us regularly enough, to be honest, that there's periods where we don't score. But during that period, you're doing other things. And you're doing the basics, and you're turning over ball. I thought our cornerbacks during that period were very, very good. There was still guys, the guys that we mentioned previously there in terms of work rate, still coming back, still carrying the ball. In fairness to St. Pat's, purple patch, yes, everybody gets them, but you have to create your own purple patches too. And you have to put on, and in fairness, they introduced one or two lads. I thought, David Orbinski came in and he generated a bit of pace into it. He generated a good bit of pace into it, actually. And a bit of that. Maybe they were slightly unlucky with a couple of things during that period as well. They might have got even closer than the 1 point. They might be somewhat disappointed themselves, because they were probably going into that game, believing they were perhaps going to turn Clonmore over. But I think, they still have a bit about them. They score some excellent scores. Jacko kicked some great frees. I think Brian Bourne got an exceptional free down on the right-hand side. They're still a very, very good team, and I think they'll be featuring at some point further on, and perhaps even featuring against Clonmore further on. So,
and there was something, I don't know, whatever Clonmore had yesterday in Netwatch Cullen Park, it was the one ingredient Tullow didn't have. They were just very, very stuck and rigid in those first 5-10 minutes, and it let Clonmore just get into what turned out to be an unassailable lead in the end. You would still have to say that Pats or Tullow will have a huge say in the remainder of this championship. If I had a criticism of Tullow, I suppose one realistic thing, which is that they're obviously a very young side. From looking at the program here, from the starting 15 from yesterday, I think only James Tobin and Shane Rowan are in their 30s, and I stand to be corrected on that. But there aren't much more than that in that starting 15. Rest of them are all young, confident guys. And while that's in no way intended to be a criticism, Clonmore had the opposite, where they can bring in an Owen Coleman, bring in a Con Murphy, and that older, calmer head when things are in the mental pot, in the melting pot. If I had a criticism of Tullow, and it would be that sometimes they seem to be more preoccupied with making sure the pass looks great instead of just making sure the pass gets to where it's going to go. And it can probably be a fine line. And there's some really, really stylish footballers that you wouldn't mind paying the entrance fee to watch. But I just wonder, especially in a game where you're trying to top the group, was it maybe time to leave aside some of the flair and go for some of the nitty gritty and try and grind out a result? Easy to say that now in hindsight, but I don't know your thoughts on that kind of.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, to be honest, we all love seeing flair, and that's what we love to watch really in football. And I don't really believe that any club should sort of try and stifle that and have guys maybe playing in a system that maybe doesn't necessarily suit them. We're well used to systems in Carlo, and we're well used to looking at it and saying, "My that was a tough watch, albeit it might yield results. It may not be entertaining." The thing about the flare pass or whatever, 9 times out of 10, it comes off for these guys because that's their makeup. That's what they do. And when it doesn't, everyone is criticising and wondering, why does he constantly bend it with the outside of the foot? And particularly the traditionalists will believe that that's not a way you should be kicking a ball and all that kind of stuff. I think if you take it out of them, what are you left with? That's your problem. What are you left with if you push them into something different? But having said that, having watched St. Pat's in the previous games, like, I found them entertaining to watch. I love looking at them. It was running, it was fast, it was the crossfield pass, it was the the TJ, kicking lovely points and jinking and all of that type of stuff.
Doesn't TJ Kavanagh have a fabulous strike of a ball? It looks like the most natural thing in the world. He just, I don't know how to describe it even. It's just a lovely natural footballing strike or punt or whatever you want to call it. And I tell you who impresses me in midfield, Will Dorn. Tullow didn't use him enough yesterday. At a crucial time in the second half, he made a really good run forward. I think he put the ball over the bar himself, but he's a really direct, powerful runner, and that's something that they can probably utilize going into the quarter-final now next week.
Yeah, I think so. I think they might feel that that they could have performed a bit better based on where they were coming into yesterday. Are they as good as Clonmore? I think yesterday suggests that maybe there is a little bit of a gap. I think Clonmore on their day, and yesterday looked like their day, certainly looked the more impressive team and seemed to have more in the tank than Pat's had. But will St. Pat's progress from the quarter final? And we're not going to make predictions. But having said, I'd say they themselves certainly will be confident enough of doing so.
And to look at the other side of the intermediate then, with Ballinabranna, Erogue, Kildavin, and we already mentioned Kilbride. Were you surprised to see Kildavin get over the line against Erogue, or what were your thoughts there?
Well, you would really, because I suppose Erogue in the previous game, like obviously in the first game against Kilbride, the scoreline was low enough, and you were kind of going, maybe Kilbride or put it up to them, or Erogue maybe under par or whatever. The only time I had seen Erogue previously at this level this year was in a league final, the Division 2 final against Clonmore, which they won, and they looked decent enough. Now they might have, a couple of guys may have progressed to the senior team or whatever, but it's still a rogue. There's they've enough guys there to put out 3 teams. So yeah. It's not a case that losing 3 or 4 has a big effect on them. So in the second game, then you kind of felt that they seem to have got it right because they had a win there. So I think the Kildavin result was probably definitely a bit of a surprise. So you kind of at this stage don't know where you are with them, to be honest.
I haven't a clue. And so I've actually managed. I'm only realizing this now. I've actually seen every team in the Intermediate Championship play now this year, and I suppose unfortunately for Airog, the only game I seen was that game against Kilbride. Now it was a wet, dewy kind of a Sunday early afternoon game, first round of the championship out in Tin Island, and for whatever reason the game just never got going. And Airog were as professional I suppose as they could be, and for long periods of the second half they had to throw the ball around, trying to draw Kilbride guys out of a fairly tight defence to try and orchestrate a score, and they did what they had to do. But I certainly didn't see them going on then to beat Ballinabrana, because I'd seen Ballinabrana take on Kildavin, and I was impressed by them, and I would have fancied Kildavin in that Ballinabrana game. So it's just testament, I suppose, to how competitive this Intermediate Championship is. Dara said it to me in an interview after the Kilbride game the other evening that as far as he's concerned, the Intermediate Championship is the best championship in Carlow if you want competitiveness and anyone can beat anyone on any given day. The quarterfinals in the Intermediate now see Ballinabrana will play Grange and St. Pat's will play Kildavin Clinigal. Very similar to the Junior Fish. You wouldn't be wanting to part with your money there to back anybody, would you?
No, you wouldn't, but they're going to be two very entertaining, I suspect, and competitive matches. And I would imagine that anybody involved in the semi-final will be over there watching them and certainly taking note of what's going on. To be quite honest, we've kind of talked about some teams maybe having one maybe below par game within the group stages and yet, find themselves progressing. Like obviously a below par game is not what you want. But having said that, if you're going to have one, you might as well have it in the group stages. So it's almost a thing of, who clicks on the day here. You wouldn't call them, and look, it's not our place to call them either because that's for somebody else. I think they'll be very.
You do what I did, and say someone's going to win by 6 points and be made an absolute fool of within an hour. And we're to ask you this, when Kilbride played Ballinabrana the other night, there was a moment near the end where Stephen Curry dived towards the ball with the 2 fists stretched out, connected with the ball, just didn't get probably enough of a strike on it to send it to the back of the net. But had Kilbride actually got over Ballinabrana, we would be looking at a totally different makeup now of how that group finished. And we can't say it enough that it was such a tight intermediate championship that you wouldn't put it past any one of the 6 teams that are left to go on and win the championship.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think, to be fair as well, though, even coming into the championship, obviously there's 8 teams starting out. People might have a view of who they think might be there or thereabouts, but nobody. I don't think anybody would be nailing on their predictions. Everybody feared everybody, and probably continue to fear everybody. But I think we did mention it before. The makeup of the championships in Carlow, whether it's senior or intermediate, whatever, the fact that you have 3 games, as opposed to in some counties you might have 4 or 5 games, depending on the numbers, or even more than that, 6 games. It's a very, very thin line between getting through to a quarterfinal or even directly to a semi-final and actually being in a relegation final. The margins are just so tight, and you look at the scorelines, and you look at we talked about Kilbride and that, and you look at the scorelines, and they'll probably look back at games and say, well, we probably could have got over the line, but for this happened, and there was a turnover ball or whatever, and that's how tight it is. So there is an element of luck too attached to these games, no question about it. But it seems as we get through it now, onto the knockout stages, it's almost about the team that is more economical, let's just say, when they have their periods of possession and have less mistakes than the other team as opposed to anything else because there's very little between them.
100%, 100%. Yeah, so I think I've already done it, but just to wrap up the intermediate then. So Ballinabranna will play Grange and Kildavin play Tullow in the quarterfinals with Rogue and Clonmore awaiting. Obviously, there'll be a draw to see who plays in the semi-final then. So all to play for in the intermediate. And we move on then to the senior championship. Interestingly, I don't know if many people realise this, but at half time in the games yesterday between Rathvilly and O'Loughlin and Pal and Rogue, at half time, as it stood, Rogue were going to top the table. O'Loughlin were going to finish in second. Rathvilly were third, and Pal would have been still in the relegation playoff. It was that group at the start of the year was titled the Group of Death, and it has turned out to be the case because the county champions are now in a relegation battle. And if I said that to you at the start of the year, you would have rightly laughed.
Yeah, and rightly so. And I suppose, to be fair, again, it's back to the tight margins and it's back to the structure as well. You have 3 games, you don't have much margin for error. And particularly in that group, look at how competitive it is. You look at the 4 teams, you look at the standard in it as well. It is, there's nothing, there's no quarter given, let's say. There's a bit less in every tackle. There's, all of those really good and positive things you expect to see in senior football. Would you have said Palatine will be in the relegation? No. Having said that, they're in it because, they just haven't performed. There'd be nobody more disappointed than themselves in that regard. They've a huge amount of talent out there, and at all levels and grades. And it's obviously a big and ever-growing club, but you're there for a reason, and you're there because you didn't perform on the field.
And while nobody would have predicted Palatine ending up down there, based on results over the last couple of years, there were people who would have felt, based on obviously Pal being the county champions, Rogue having recently won 4 in a row, Rathvilly having won the championship in 2021, the odd one out at the start of the year looked like O'Loughlin. And now when you factor in the performance they put in against Palatine and how close they pushed, had they maybe and one more forward or half a forward, I don't know if Rathvilly would have gotten over the line last night. And it just goes to show that you write off O'Loughlin at your peril. They had a point to prove against Palatine, and they damn near proved it on the double yesterday.
Yeah, look, I would imagine people who maybe didn't keep much of an eye on O'Loughlin in advance of the championship would certainly have been looking at the 3 big guns and said, O'Loughlin will need something special. But I have to say, I thought their first half performance yesterday was as special as I had seen. Now, obviously, that game there was mistakes on both sides. The purists might be saying, there was things happening and various bits and bobs that maybe contributed to it. But as a spectacle and certainly as a neutral, I thought it was brilliant. I thought the intensity that O'Loughlin brought and just the sheer willingness to just keep going forward in the first half was just. I thought their midfield was doing really well, which is kind of a contradiction because Ian Atkinson and Dave Bambrick were doing excellently. Atkinson was carrying ball, but yet on the flip side, Brendan Murphy was probably Rathvilly's man of the match in the first half, and all those guys are in the same cluster. He, kicking a few points and keeping them in touch. Obviously, if you have Aaron Hammond and Cathal Coughlin and Seamus Kinsella, and they were as good as, I'd say it was as good as a half they probably put in the whole year themselves, even, and said they probably realised that too.
You mentioned those 2 lads there, Seamus Kinsella, who's on the go a long time, and Cathal Coughlin. Some of their efforts in the first half were proper worldly kicks. Like, if you were a Rathvilly defender, you were saying, I have them go aside, or we have men over. You'll be happy enough to let lads shoot from where they were shooting from, but they wound back the clock in that first half, and some of the kicking was sublime. And then you said it yourself, Brendan. Then he kicked 5 points in play. I think in total, I think every one of them were nearly outside the 45-meter line. The display of kicking in the game overall was tremendous to see, and it was, I suppose, a proper senior game of football, wasn't it?
I was it. It's like if a defender, is marking some of those guys that are kicking the ball from 45 yards over the bar. There's nothing you can do about that. You've probably done. You've probably turned him inside out 3 or 4 times, and he's kicked that over the bar. That's fine. As a defender or as a manager, what you don't want is somebody giving away cheap scores. So, like your goal is really to make them kick from there. And if they're able to do it, the hats off to them. I think both sides were doing it. I thought as well in the in that game, I thought Ty Roach was exceptional. Not the biggest, strongest, tallest lad, although I'm not saying certainly he displayed an awful lot of strength going forward. He's very, very hard to knock off the ball. Guys were, as I said, leaving a bit into tackle, and he was still able to drive on. Obviously got on the end of an attack and got a goal, but I thought he was exceptional. I think in the second half, I suppose O'Loughlin, probably would have felt that maybe there should have been a bit more of a gap between them and Rathvilly because of the maybe possession they had in good areas. I think Rathvilly then started to some degree, I suppose, knuckle down and start to grind it, and they sort of ground through the gears without doing anything too exceptional. Colin Byrne was starting to run out of the back line. Brendan, as you say, was kicking things. I have to give great credit to the Briar. I thought Alan Kelly put in great kicked a couple of great scores. So that balance of sort of youth and maybe not so young was pretty good. Full credit to the Rathvilly management and line. They lobbed in 3 subs. At half time, I think it was half time. As opposed to one trickle feeding them.
That's 3 games in a row here. They've done that now. Usually, what we're used to seeing is where a team maybe runs in one fella, maybe halfway through the second half, and then with 5 minutes to go, there's 2 and 3 lads going in, and it's usually not enough time to make a difference if it's a difference you're trying to make. Your thoughts on making 3 subs at once early in the game more so than leaving until halfway through the second half?
Oh, well, I think it's a good idea. Like, it's not that long ago, 3 subs was the maximum we could make in GAA, We're now gone to 5. So, on a percentage wise, letting in 3, you still have 2 left. It's like letting in 1 in the older days, I suppose, when you had 3. But I think it's a pretty good idea. Obviously, if it's not working out for him for whatever reason, and guys that get taken off, it's just not their day. Them guys come out the next day and blow everybody away. But I think it's an excellent idea. It shakes up the rest of the 12 that are there, because they're kind of going, the boys are not afraid to act. They're not afraid to take 3 at a time, and they might lob 2 in the next time, and it might be me. So you're up in your game a little bit. But the other side of it is, like obviously the first half was very intense, very tough hitting, an awful lot of running. Like, if you have 3 lads to come in at half time who are, well capable of playing at that standard, like, they're bringing an energy to it. They've probably 20-30% more energy than the guys who went off at half time and had the and came back out. They're starting to stiffen up, and I think it worked very well for Rathvilly. I think it certainly worked in their favour yesterday, and I suppose it did bring on the other guys, like in middle of the field there, Connor. I thought Connor really came into it as well in the second half. For whatever reason, he kicked obviously what ended up to be a winning point near the end. But it did bring on other lads. I certainly thought it brought on other lads, which was a help. But having said that, O'Loughlin will probably feel they could have got a draw there near the end, but for not having a bit of composure or something like that.
So what we do this game? Yeah, to finish on this game, and then we'll go to the other group as well. I'm going to contradict myself. I said that it was a proper senior game, proper senior football game a few minutes ago. If I told you that there was 22 wide balls kicked in that game the other night, 14 for Rathvilly, 8 for O'Loughlin. Rathvilly dropped 3 short in on the keeper's chest. That's if you take the 17 scoring chances plus the 15 points they scored, it's 32 shots on goal. And I'm sure if you're JJ Smith or Kevin Byrne, looking back at that, you're going to say, lads, while 15 points is decent scoring, the economics of that don't really make sense compared to a slightly better performance from O'Loughlin in the sense that they had 12 shots where they scored, and then 8 wide. It was far. Maybe the argument is, Fish, that they had to be more economical. Such was their the way their team is made up, and with their their kind of a lot of reliance on Coughlin and Kinsella up front. But look, we've talked enough about the Rathvilly game. The last thing I mentioned on it is Aaron Almond has a gripe, and a very reasonable gripe, where O'Loughlin were awarded a free near the end, and one Rathvilly lads ballooned the ball away, and Patrick Murphy, the ref, moved the ball up. Now it was supposed to be 13 meters. I'd say he moved it 6, and it was almost no advantage. It teased Am Leifeld into having a shot at goal from a long way out, 40, maybe 47 meters. And if you'd actually moved it up, the 13 meters were supposed to be, they may have had a chance to level the game. Rathvilly will say, surely Brandon Kelly was fouled going in near the end. And then the incident with Brendan, where he ended up on the ground, and there was 2 lads over with what I'm told were closed fist tackles, and apparently nothing was seen. So maybe on balance, lads will say all's fair, but you know what? We won't even go.
Well, I won't get into the Brendan incident or Brandon's or whatever. Patrick refereed he saw fit, and look, that's fine, and maybe things were let go, they shouldn't have been let go, and all that kind of thing. But on that particular Hammond, where he might have had a gripe in relation to the free, the ball was actually ballooned away twice in that particular incident before he got the free. So, in fairness to him, I'm not sure you're allowed 26 yards, but he probably half it.
we may get James Foley or Marion Hayden or someone on. I think from memory, ref can move it up twice, and after that, on the third time, it's a yellow card or something. Looking at the other side, or the other game in that group, Pal and Éire Óg, I felt there had to be a sting in the tail of Pal, that do or die battle against Éire Óg, one of their old enemies, down in Fenagh. I thought everything about that game was kind of wading in Pal's favour, and in the end, it was a poor return, 111 to 6 points. Did that surprise you?
It did. Well, the margin of victory certainly surprised me. Obviously, playing Éire Óg, you're probably never really the favourite, to be honest. But I think the margin of victory did surprise me. I think we talked about it last week. I thought the fact that it was in Fenagh, probably gave Pal a little bit of an advantage, maybe out of Dr. Cullen, or Netwatch Cullen. But I think, Pal will be hugely disappointed, I would imagine, with that performance.
Mm-hmm. And it puts them into a relegation battle now with Fenagh. But before we move away from Éire Óg, and I think I've said this to you kind of off camera, or maybe in the false start, shall we say? But an Éire Óg team who probably haven't been firing all cylinders yet, with a fit Jordan Morrissey potentially back now, are a very, very dangerous outfit when nobody seems to be talking about them. And you take an O'Loughlin team now who have put Pal to the sword, were extremely impressive against Rathvilly, scored 2 great goals against Éire Óg, extremely dangerous as well. Before we move over to the other side of the group, the 3 teams emerging from this group, the Rathvilly, Éire Óg and O'Loughlin, will still have a lot to say in the rest of the championship.
Yeah, but look at you're down to the 3 teams from that group who've put in the 3 performances. So that's a simple fact. There's no real hard luck story in that. They were the 3 teams that put in the 3 performances, so they're there. Look at Éire Óg, as Championship football progresses, always improve. There's no question about that. And they always improve. Are they to the level in which they'll win a championship? We don't know. Um, would you would you be fearful of them if you were playing them? None of those teams are fearful of each other. They know each other well. They're all, adult. They're well able for it. But would would you, on the other hand, be thinking we'll take these handy enough? Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And in the same way that I was saying about, at halftime in the game yesterday, Rogue were actually going to go through on top of the group. If we cast our memory back to the first round of the championship, there was a moment in the Rathvilly Pal game where Conor Lawler was what looked like through on goal. That was it was a good bit out, but he hit a rasper of a shot and it bounced off the post. Rathvilly came down on an attack. Brian McMahon ended up getting a black card. Rathvilly tagged on 2 goals, and you'd wonder, had Conor Lawler's no reflection on him, he did a great game that night. If that ball hits the back of the net, does it change the course of that game? And as a result, do the county champions, after putting Rathvilly to the sword, gather momentum? And does that one incident, followed by maybe the black card to Finbar Cabinet and other things happen in other games, but that did feel like a massive moment in that game, and it possibly Pal's progression in the championship. Is it madness to say that it hung on that particular moment because it was a 14-man turnaround in one sense?
Yeah, look at it. I suspect, there are other moments that they might look at as well. But, again, getting back to the conversation about the small margins, little things happen in game. In that particular game, like Liam Gavin probably had the game of his life. He got 2-7, I think, in that one, 2-4 from play. He got those 2 goals after that particular event. Let's just say, would it have been different if the ball had hit the back of the net? Would Rathvilly have had even a different approach thereafter? Would they have to play a different way? Would that have made a difference in terms of the creation of the chances for the 2 goals? Possibly. But, the big question, I suppose, would have been, had Pal, as an example, got through to the quarterfinals by winning that, you'd still be talking about Palatine as potential county champions.
Yeah.
So this is the margins. But Palatine and the players and the management and everything else, they'll be quite honest, I suspect, about it, and I think they'll realise they are where they are solely because of their performances on the field and no other reason.
Looking at the other group, then, probably finished ultimately maybe as predicted with Tyrrell on top of the group. They've gone through on 5 points. Let's remember, Tyrrell were in the county final last year. They haven't, as the fellow once said, they haven't gone away. The first day out against Rangers, okay, it was a drawn game, 9 points apiece. There was the 1 point and all that, but they've quietly gone about their business since, and 5 points on the board, steadily improving, and absolutely nobody talking about them. It couldn't be suiting them better in that sense. And I suppose we expected them to get over Fenna, maybe not by as close a margin over the weekend. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it would, but I also think that, and I think we talked about it last week. I watched Fenna against Rangers. I know there was a good few points in it in the end, but there were periods of that game where Fenna, were creating a lot. There were, 1 or 2 more, maybe different decisions, maybe in the forward line or whatever. They possibly could have won that game. Similarly, I suspect the Tinryland game also. Tinryland, everyone's probably saying are under the radar, and to some degree, but you can't really be under the radar if you were in a county final last year. But having said that, I suppose, you see the situation in relation to Pal. But, would people have been discounting Tinryland by virtue of maybe how they got on in the county final last year? I don't know. It's hard to know. It's hard to know with them. I think there's an element now though at some point of Tinryland needing to produce a senior championship.
Yeah,
You know, I think within themselves there might be an element of pressure as well. You know, whatever about what everybody else thinks of. I think they're at a stage now where they probably feel they are due one, and then they probably need to deliver something
yeah,
shortly.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and that's a reasonable, it's a reasonable comment on them, and I think it's probably a pressure that they accept. The other game in that group then was Rangers and Bagenalstown. Now, I suppose I'm worried in one sense, considering I've skin in the game in terms of Philly, but I haven't seen Bagenalstown play yet, and they've been again quietly going about their business. I was surprised that to beat that Rangers team by 7 points is it's an excellent result to have, and I made the comment about a Rogue being a very dangerous team going into the next going into the quarterfinals. O'Loughlin, very dangerous team going into the quarterfinals. Are there two more dangerous teams left in this championship than Bagenalstown and Mountain Rangers?
No, probably not. I think to be fair, Bagenalstown probably play a different style than quite a lot of teams.
Mm.
It's they have forward line that would on their day possibly rip apart anything if
Mm-hmm.
everybody clicks. In fact, you don't need everybody clicking. You could even get 4 out of 6 on a day. You'd be going fairly well. So, like Bagenalstown over the last maybe 8 to 10 years, we would have seen them progressing. They're very good underage and progressed up through the ranks. So, I probably would have thought they'd actually be further on, maybe last year or the year before, than it was a bit slower coming. But having said that, I think they've now got a situation where those young guys that maybe we probably had too much expectation of because they were quite young, are now very much matured.
Yeah.
So I think they should have a big say on it as well. I just think their style of football is nice. It's lovely to watch as well. It's exciting. They're an exciting team, no question about that.
Would it be an idea, do you think, to put the intermediate relegation playoff and the senior relegation playoff as a double header, or am I asking for too much there? It'd be a mouth-watering affair to watch those two games back to back.
I think it would. I suppose the thing is, do people go watch relegation finals other than the people who are involved in them? I don't know. Does the neutral go to watch the demise of a particular team or not? I don't think they do. Having been in one or two, they're a lonely little spot now, I have to say, and you don't get too many neutrals going to them. But having said that, the two teams in them treat them like any other final because you have to, because the consequences of losing are dramatic enough. And then, of course, the consequences of listening to everyone telling you, why you lost is probably even worse because you have so long a period of time to turn it around. It's different losing, for instance, as an example, it's different losing, say, an intermediate final. You can rectify that. You can start rectifying that within the 12 months. Unfortunately, if you've been in a relegation piece, in order to get back to where you were previously, it takes a lot longer because you have to go through the lower division. So the consequences are probably more significant in that regard. Would I love to see the two games together? Of course. Would you? Yes. Would others? Possibly not. Possibly not.
Would you give? And I'm being facetious here. Do you give Fenna a prayer in that relegation game with Pal?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I think they've enough. They've enough youth. I think they've enough. They've enough skill. They've enough good ball players that, again, if they manage just to lift their performance by 15-20% over what they've done so far, and again, if they click to some degree, and again, been a little bit more economical, let's just say, with their possession and making a few sort of more right decisions in the forward line. I think I would give them a prayer. Yeah, definitely.
To finish off with that group, then I suppose the really interesting part of it was the drawing game really threw it open to all the different possibilities. I suppose in the end, a little bit of the expectations were realised and results went somewhat as expected. But the way it finishes now, Tino Ireland are obviously straight through to a semi-final with Rathvilly on the other side. Bagnallstown will now play O'Loughlin, and a Rogue play Mount Leinster Rangers in 2 quarterfinals. And people who are listening or watching might say he's not saying that again, is he? But what kind of a person would you want to be to try and part with money on backing anyone in any of those games?
Oh, I think both of them games are almost a 50-50 game. You know, possibly people may not consider the Rogue Rangers game a 50-50 game. I wouldn't be one of those people. You know, Rangers are very, very capable. I think the Bagnallstown or Loughlin game for me would be the one if it was in 2 different venues. That'd be the one. That'd be the one I'd want to go to. I just think that'll be the pick of the 2. But no, I think it's a very, very difficult call. Both games.
Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you once again. Not sure if Kevin will give us the gig again next week. Just to mention the sponsors really briefly, massive thanks to the Arboretum, Carlo Electrical Services, PFT Travel, Scats Bouncing Castles, Conley's Top Line, J&J Services, Milano's, Seamus Byrne Electrical, Ray Wheel Unlimited, Talbot Fitness, and Earth Spas. Fisher, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully Kevin is on the mend and he'll be back next week. And you never know, he might bring you back.
Yeah, we'll tell Kevin the grapes and Lucasade are underway.
Great stuff. Thanks a minute, Fisher.
Cheers, Ed. Talk to you.
All the best. Bye now.